welcome back to Our Country, Our Freedoms, Our Constitution, Lessons for Freedoms. I'm Rick Trader with the AUNTV Network. My co-host today is George Landreth, President and CEO of Frontiers of Freedom. And you know, George, we just wrapped up our last segment with a great quote from Ronald Reagan, and please repeat it.
Absolutely. He spoke prophetically when he said this. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children what it was like to live in the United States when we were free.
And with that, I'd like to introduce a couple of our guests here on the Conservative Commandos. Judy Lane Frazier is the founder and president of We the Kids, and also Lydia Nuttall. She's the executive board member of We the Kids. And ladies, welcome. And I want to start with you, Judy. Judy, tell us about We the Kids. Why did you found it, and why do you believe it is so important?
I could go on and on and on. Thank you for having us on your show. We the Kids is based on getting kids involved in learning America's history through doing projects. Not only reading about America, but by getting involved, by going out, doing interviews, doing reports, and on a variety of subjects. I've been doing this since 2012.
And why did you start it? Talk about why you started it and some of the results that you've gotten out of We the Kids.
Years ago, we had an issue in our family with my sister and her husband being targeted. And it's a long story. They were targeted by the law. As it wound up, what happened is they were arrested. Mm-hmm. And they were wrongfully targeted. It was fought to the Supreme Court and they won. Okay, it's law. It's on the books.
Wow.
We started.
Well, that really fits into what George and I were talking about in the previous segment. We were talking about the law. We used the example of the Donald Trump cases, which are taking place in New York and other areas. And that has not gone through our constitutional system yet. In other words, it's going to go through appeal, appellate, and hopefully possibly end up in the Supreme Court. And that's what our Constitution gives us. And as George and I talked about in the first subject, this is a republic. It's not a democracy.
Exactly.
So exactly what your family went through is what we're talking about here.
Well, what we found out through what happened to them is a lot of people will not fight. They'll just take a plea deal and they won't fight for their rights, which is very scary because that sets a precedence all over the United States for all of us. But they did fight. They fought and it cost them almost $10,000 and they won on the Supreme Court level. But
wow.
We started talking about losing our rights and the kids were listening and my grandkids started talking about the fact that they weren't being taught history in schools. So that kicked off about what's going on today, why it's such a concern. And, you know, the kids ask, what about our rights? Which kicked us off to We the Kids. You know, we the people. What about our rights? We the kids. So it's been a series of lessons over the years learning. I've had to, on the job, learn about what I'm doing. The kids had said at the time that, you know, if we did develop a program, which we have, I believe it's one of the best programs in the United States right now to get kids involved in learning history. The kids said if it's too much like school, nobody's going to be interested. So what we work on doing is teaching kids how to be journalists. Only teaching them to learn to report on the facts and learn journalistic integrity. That's it.
Boy, that's so important today. We on the Conservative Commandos radio show, and when I say we, I mean George Landreth and Sharon Angle, my co-host. And really, Judy, I think that the media that we have today, the mainstream media, the left-leaning media is the biggest problem in our country today. The fact that they are not reporting the facts. They're just reporting their
Correct.
own agenda. And I want to bring Lydia
They're
Nuttall
actually
into the
propagandists for the far extreme left.
That's it. I want to bring Lydia Nuttall into the conversation. She's the executive board member of We the Kids. And Lydia, how did you get involved in We the Kids?
Judy's fault. Well, I got tired of what the state of Utah, where I live, when I looked at all the textbooks that my children were learning in our school district when it came to American history, except for one textbook, K through 12, I reviewed all of them. Only one had it where they're actually studying the Declaration of Independence and actually studying the Constitution. All the others talk about what government has become, and those founding documents are in the back in the reference section. Well, let's ask your listening audience, your watching audience, who reads the reference section of textbooks? So I realized if we don't do it as parents in the home and grandparents, then our kids will never know what freedom is. Number one, they live in it, but when you've never experienced or been taught what the opposite of liberty is, there's so many countries where the people live in literal bondage, in hell. They can't choose their profession, the government choose it. They're all equal, but they're all equally poor. They're all standing in lines, except for the ones that are in power in government. They're not poor. They're the ones living off of the fruits of the labors of the common people. So there's no prosperity, right? No liberty, no prosperity. There's just a shortage on everything. You can't even, with a lot of these countries, owning a car is like only for those that are in the government. How about kids? Like if you want to have a family, there are governments that tell you how many kids you can have. I mean, this is just unreal. This is just sick. And liberty, everyone should have liberty. And if our kids aren't taught what the opposite of liberty is, and then what the principles of freedom are, like that are in our Constitution. The principles are in the Declaration of Independence. Our Constitution puts it all in place and preserves our rights and our liberties by law. It's the supreme law of the land. And we have these days where people don't know what the law is. So if they're in positions of government, they're not making bills that are within the parameters of the Constitution. And the rest of us who vote for them, we don't know what the law is, so we don't know if they are actually making unconstitutional laws that we then have to live by.
They don't know either, Lydia. They
Yeah.
don't know either because they don't know our Constitution. But I wanted to ask you about your book. You have written a book, Forgotten American Stories, Celebrating America's Constitution. If you will, tell us a little forgotten American story about our Constitution. We are celebrating Constitution Day, September 17th. What little story is in your book that relates?
Well, one of my favorites is chapter 9. So there's 12 chapters. There's 12 months in the year. And most of the chapters have at least 2 one-page stories in there that have something to do with the founding of our country and to help our kids and families appreciate our Constitution. So let's just talk about the one for September, which is chapter 9. September is month 9. It's called The Success Formula of the United States Constitution. And in there, we have an experiment where they can use, that baking soda and vinegar experiment. And where we substitute the baking soda with flour, it looks like they look similar. And we substitute the white vinegar with water. And they just do an experiment, which one of these combinations work. The only one that works that gives you a reaction, it fizzles and foams and is really cool, is the vinegar and water one. Well, our Constitution has a success formula too. You can't trade out the ingredients. You
No.
have to keep the
Interesting.
ingredients the way they are in order to have it function and create and preserve a free society. So, and there are 5 of them. And I'm hoping, this sounds crazy, even though I wrote it, sometimes I'm like, I can't remember what the 5th one is. But the first one of the top ones is a moral and a religious society. If you cannot self-govern yourself, if you don't have an internal compass of what's right and wrong, none of this is to any avail. It will not produce freedom. You have to have a population who have a moral compass inside of right and wrong. And right now I'm kind of scared because anything that flies, if you feel it's your truth, then it flies. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? If you jump off of a cliff saying, I don't believe in gravity, you're still going to get the same result as someone that does. So that's the first one. The second one is that the people are sovereign. We have control of the government. Government works for us to preserve our rights. Okay. Not government, makes us do things because they're in power. The next one is separation of powers. If you give a kid a knife and a pan of brownies and he's got 2 friends to share them with, and you give that person the power to cut the brownies, to determine if they're equal, and then to execute, give the friends a piece of brownie, chances are great that person might give themselves the bigger brownie, right?
Yeah.
But if you give one friend the knife to cut it, one friend to determine if they're equal, and the other friend to serve everyone a piece of brownie, then checks and balances.
That sounds like the branches of our government.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I used to use that when I would speak at elementary schools. I would bring a package of Twinkies, and I'd tell kids, I tell them in the first instant, okay, you can cut this Twinkie however you want, and then you can give one piece of it to that person and you keep the rest. I said, whatever you want, half, thirds, it's your choice.
Guess what?
And then we'd come up and say, okay, now you cut and you pick. And all of a sudden, they spent a lot of time. In fact, sometimes even asking, can I have a ruler to make sure I'm cutting it? Because they want to, all of a sudden now. So you're exactly right. Checks and balances are an important element. I think
you have to. And then the last one, because I think I already did 4. The last one is is representation. Like you mentioned, Rick, we are a republic. We are not a democracy. We use democracy, meaning we, the people, to elect people to represent us in the state, local, and national government. Okay, because we can't be at every single meeting. We can't, as the people, explore and investigate every single bill or every single problem. We elect representatives at those 3 levels to represent us. Okay. So
Right.
we, the people, elect representatives. That is a republic. That's a definition of a republic. And we're actually a constitutional republic because we don't just elect those people and give them all the power then over us. Their power is held in check because there's only certain powers that the Constitution gives them. And if families would read the Constitution, especially Article 1 about a legislature, Section 8, they will see all the powers that we give, specific ones, to our representatives. And you will be appalled about how much our government does. That's not even in the Constitution. Education is not a national, federal, USA, president or Congress right. It's a state right or an individual right. That's one of them. I mean, one of many.
Hey, George, we've talked on the Conservative Commandos radio show many times that the Constitution actually, what it does is limits the powers of the federal government.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, even the Bill of Rights does. Some people think the Bill of Rights is a statement of your rights. But for example, the First Amendment starts out, Congress shall make no law, ... In other words, even the Bill of Rights is actually more limitations on government. They can't take your right to bear arms. They can't take your home and, use it for the military, to house military, and so forth. That's the Third Amendment. And you go on down the line. It was just a series of limitations. And then on top of that, as she correctly said, The first section of the Constitution that deals with the legislature, if you go to the segment 8 of it, it lists a very short list of powers. And I think it's important because our founders wanted to make sure to protect the minorities, as it were. And I don't mean minorities necessarily skin color or race or religion or anything like that. Everybody can be a minority. Even the powerful and wealthy can be a minority in the face of a tyrannical mob. For example, the French Revolution proves that. During the French Revolution, people whose crime was owning a home or a business were violently pulled from their homes or businesses and beheaded simply because the majority mob had obtained enough power and they decided the well-off must pay for being well-off. And blood ran through the streets of Paris as the majority mob claimed it was promoting freedom. So the point is, I think we all ought to understand, no matter who we are, we could theoretically be a minority. And we ought to be careful not to give government power the ability, just because they get 51% of the vote, that they get to do whatever they want. They can put us in a guillotine and cut our head off because, doggone it, we own a home. How dare you?
Right.
Like, really? That's freedom? Okay. These are coups.
Judy, I wanted to go back to you for a minute because you said something about the Constitution is not being taught in schools, and I'll tell you, it rang a bell with me. Several years ago, I was at a political meeting where a candidate was announcing his candidacy to run for Congress. And after the announcement, it got into a general discussion, questions, answers, and a general discussion. And the discussion got to the point, why isn't the Constitution being taught in school? So as we were going around the room, I could see this one lady there. She was getting very upset. And finally, she just blurted out, she says, listen, I want you to know this. I am a third grade teacher. I teach the Constitution in my classroom, but to do so, I have to close my door. So the administration and my fellow teachers do not see or find out what I'm doing. Judy, that's a terrible state for American education to be in.
Ignorance is bliss. Well, we don't teach our kids. We as Americans are going to lose our country. We see it happening now. What's going on is extremely serious. This is no joke. I believe everything that's being brought out by our conservative right, if you will, about, it's very disturbing, just truly disturbing. These kids are being lied to in schools. They're not being taught our accurate history. They're certainly not being taught about the Constitution or our government, why we are the greatest country in the world. And we still are the greatest country in the world. We still can turn that around. And as Lydia said, it's all based on God. It starts with God. God gave us our moral compass. Our founders believed in God. Many of them, they came over here, they gave their life, they gave their homes, their wealth, everything to fight for our rights. So I get pretty upset about this because how dare us as Americans.
Judy, let me tell you, I think everyone should be getting upset about it. And that's the problem. Yes. Not enough people are. Judy Lane Frazier, I want to thank you for joining us here in the Conservative Commandos. Please tell our audience how they can find out more about We the Kids.
Go to wethekids.us.
wethekids.us. And also Lydia Nuttall. And Lydia, before you go, please tell our audience where they could get your book, Forgotten American Stories, Celebrating America's Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. They can get it at wethekids.us. They can also get it at forgottenamericanstories.com. And I do donate $10 to We the Kids. for every purchase.
Wow, God bless you for that. Ladies, I want to thank you for joining us here in the Conservative Commandos. I know I said 10 minutes. This is almost a half an hour now. I really appreciate your time. Lydia, I know you're doing this under very difficult circumstances, doing it from your car. And Judy, I know I just called you about an hour or two ago. So, hey, look, we're doing this segment on our country, our freedoms, our Constitution, lessons for freedom. Could you join us? And you says, yes, I can, but I want to bring Lydia with me. So, ladies, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you.
George.
And George, I want to thank you for sitting in as my co-host. And George, tell our audience how they could find you.
Well, sure. Frontiers of Freedom is our organization, founded by Senator Malcolm Wallop of Wyoming. He was a friend and ally of Ronald Reagan's, and you can find us at ff.org, ff.org. Pretty simple thing. You can find me as well on Twitter. Very clever name. I use G. Landreth. Isn't that clever?
Glandreth.
Glandreth. I should have thought that through because Glandreth, doesn't really sound that great. Glandreth,
sounds a little medical to me, but again, yeah, George and ladies, I want to thank you. I'm Rick Trader with the AUNTV Network. This is another edition of Our Country, Our Freedoms, Our Constitution, Lessons for Freedoms. If you'd like to see a replay of this, go to our Rumble website. Go to AUN-TV.com, AUN-TV.com. God bless you. God bless America. But for right now, we are out of time. We got to run and we got to go. We'll see you tomorrow. That'll be on TV and on radio.